Thank you, Stephanie. Tonight we will hear from Amy Sillman. Amy lives and works in New York. She has had solo exhibitions at Kunsthaus Bregenz, Austria, Institute of Contemporary Art, Boston, Hirshhorn Museum and Sculpture Garden, Washington, D.C., Blaffler Art Museum at the University of Houston, and the Institute of Contemporary Art at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. And I just learned that Amy's going to have a show at the Arts Club in Chicago in March 2019. So you should all put it on your calendars. Amy uses drawing as a catalyst for her artistic practice. Most recently, she has been working with Seriality and Language, publishing a zine to accompany her painting exhibitions and exploring subjects such as color and time. Keenly attuned to language, Sillman is interested in mistakes, accidents, productive conflict, parapraxis arising from the materiality of her calligraphic impulse. Please welcome Amy Sillman.
Hi. Thank you so much for coming. Thanks, John, wherever you are, for originally inviting me, and thank you, the Society of Contemporary Art, for all, and Jennifer and Patty and everybody who I had lunch with, and thank you very much for coming, artists that I know, art historians, and other wonderful people from all walks of life. I grew up here. But I just want to say one thing. I have, of course, it's like, I don't have that much time, and I make really weird, complicated work in some ways. So I'm going to try, rather than to sort of just do a chronological walkthrough of like, this work and then that work, I thought I would try to use the occasion of this talk to open up pressures and mistakes and areas of, confusion or conflict a little bit, so that it's not necessarily like greatest hits, tour of greatest hits, but maybe more a process-based kind of way of thinking about the work. But the other thing is, it's not that long. Like, it's a kind of a, I'm old and I've been doing art for a long time, so I had to cut almost everything out. So I'm gonna whip through this with record speed. But before I start, I just want to say one other thing, and it's a little bit embarrassing, but I'm like a really good PowerPoint person, but I had a crazy tech disaster on Thursday, and then just now my glasses broke, so there's something weird. So I think the tech is okay, and I think my PowerPoint will hold until we close this machine, in which case it will then disappear and be gone. But I can't turn it off, and if it breaks in the middle, I'll toggle to another thing. Just bear with me and don't be mad at me. I'm usually a really good techie, but this last weekend was a little weird, for a lot of reasons. So I was looking through Lee Lozano's notebooks the other day, and I realized that she had made this drawing, it's on the right, about, her. She was a great American artist, very eccentric, and who did incredible graphs and charts and diagrams. And this is her diagram. I don't know what it's for. It seemed right for me to sort of use it as the model of how this story that I'm going to tell you has a lot of little weird side things and adjacent things, and it's not a straight line. I didn't do the pot baller series because that's her work, but for the rest of it, it seemed appropriate. And this is a picture of me installing this show in Bregenz, which I always really thought was great. So this is the sort of intro slide. But I wanted to just give a little shout out to some heroes and influences. And just to say that I grew up in Chicago in the 60s, and then in the 70s I moved to New York. And I think sources and interest and interest sources, founding things in my life involve humor, language, feminism, poetry, performance, video, film, homemade stuff, bedroom productions, desktop publishing. The idea that I got from being a person from Chicago of being sensitive to and open to a kind of other discourse. Of course, when I grew up, there was the Chicago Imagists who were very important to me because I was interested in the issue or the history of cartooning and jokes and I think it was jokes in relationship to the pressure, the sort of political pressures that were present in the 60s in Chicago and that I was aware of in my life in the 60s and 70s. And so all of these things and all of these things also play a role in informing and informing like this chunk of work that we're going to look at. And just as a kind of homage to some of the influences, which I had to sort of cut all of it out or it would just be the whole talk. I mean, when I was young, I was deeply invested in weird underground cinema, feminism. My drawing teacher was John Borofsky, who was really a nut. I actually loved seeing the Saul Steinberg show here the other day. I was deeply in love with the sort of caustic humor of the Snowball piece, of David Hammond's, of all kinds of people in New York, and even starting in Chicago when I was a kid and I lived here before I moved to New York, who were dancers at Mo Ming, who were doing performance and dance and were informing me about the idea of using the body to make art. So then I went to New York and there was this whole other entirely different discourse about art going on. I got there in '75 and I was going to try to be an illustrator because the guy who was my painting teacher, I said very shyly, I want to be a painter. And he said, no, you'll just be a waitress. You should learn illustration because then you can make money. And I didn't know any better, so I said, okay, I'll go to illustration school. Where should I go? And I went to School of Visual Arts where there was a good illustration program. And I was making these teeny little drawings that were very intimate and very personal and with all of those sources that I've already kind of, I guess, invoked a little bit, you can understand that this sort of rough, immediate, cartoony language was something that I felt comfortable in. I switched out of illustration and went into painting eventually, but with a big fuck you. The attitude of painting in New York was really different from the one that I had experienced here. I mean, I didn't have an experience of painting in Chicago, but when I got to New York, it was about abstract expressionism and pop and minimalism and post-minimalism and this sort of high legacy of a lot of stuff that, in a funny way, like a kid who likes to make like secret bedroom jokes doesn't really understand. I also didn't understand the discourse around painting, which was that it was the 70s. It was bad. It was not an okay thing to do, and it was not an okay thing for women to be doing. So there was sort of no entry, and I ended up feeling like I had to just keep drawing. And drawing always became this sort of thing that I could do that didn't seem as troubled and vexed and tainted as this sort of high modern history of painting. But I could still do it myself with my hands. So I'm kind of just going to run through a couple of really achronological images. This is just again a kind of funny intro to show you the weird variety of things that sort of came out of all of this. So these are like really old drawings that I did that are teeny. They're teeny, they're much smaller than even on the screen. And then this is a painting I did last year, or now, I did it this year and it's in a show in Berlin right now. So they look the same to me, basically. But they were made like 40 years apart. And then in that show, I hung the painting on the left, which is really small, with a big giant painting, not this one, but a different one, but which I think, seen next to the painting that you're seeing it next to, allows you to see the code. in a way. Like, I think you can sort of see the hands and see the eye and see the mouth and see the sort of interior presence of a narrative of the body, of the face. The big painting was clearly about, essentially directly about shame, but the little one was too, but it's written in the kind of code of gestural abstraction. Meanwhile, like, this painting is literally from, a couple weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, and it shows you, I think, one part of this field that I'm trying to kind of make for myself, this space. That one part of the field is classic gestural painting, like straight up. It doesn't have a narrative, it doesn't have a secret content, it's not ashamed, and it's not really content-driven, I guess you would say. I guess you would call it real painting. So there's this kind of part of my work, but meanwhile there's this whole other thing that I've always been doing, and I continue to do it. This is an older one, but I've been drawing portraits from life of friends and associates and groups of people that I work with, and trying to have this other part of the practice be a very personal and direct transcription of being with people and looking at them directly and trying to, with full-on skill, like, see if I can render them in my hand. And then meanwhile, this is another painting from that show, and it's not completely abstract. And it has a body that's much more legible in a kind of space, a sort of three-part space. So it has the hybridity, I guess, that where the language of that cartoony stuff, of course, an incredible debt to Guston, and the language of a very slow, determined physical kind of process of painting are both there at once. And then meanwhile, like, this is another sort of set of pressures. The thing on the left is a phone drawing that I made for a friend who wrote me like a year ago or so, saying, I can't sleep, and I had a weird bad dream that I ate my hands off my arms. And I was like laying in bed in Europe, super lonely in my little hotel room, getting these messages from a friend in California. So I drew the picture that she told me she dreamed, and it's literally this big, it's on my phone, and sent it to her. And then I thought, oh wow, that drawing is amazing. I have to make a huge painting out of it. So the huge painting came came kind of out of it. But that's why I'm trying to explain all this stuff to you today, because I want you to understand how daily sources like friends' emails, weird little phone apps that are free, everything is part of the practice. And then meanwhile, like, this is an installation that I had in the museum in Oxford a couple of years ago, which is about, I think it's, I don't know how many, but like 1,000 stills, also which I drew all on my phone, which is literally this thing, with my finger, and then printed out as a series of images that could be downloaded directly. That they were drawn in like 10 seconds, and then they were saved, and then that would be how I would construct an animation, which I'll come to soon. But I'll come to talk about soon, but I wanted you to see this scale shift, where some of the stuff that I feel is totally legitimate and valid is done with my finger on my telephone at 2 in the morning while laying in bed, and the other stuff actually requires a printer and, some really good paper and a ginormous room. This is an installation similar. I seem to have this format that's interesting to me of an accumulative series of works hung as a kind of giant world that you can walk in, but yet which each of them maintain that sort of intimacy that the little things that I'm talking about have. So this was a wall of drawings that I put together a couple years ago, all of which I made in a bathtub in Berlin. I was not in the bathtub, they were in the bathtub, but I didn't have a studio for about 6 months when I was teaching in Germany for a semester recently. And I realized that I had to make my work in the bathtub, which was the only place in that apartment you could be messy. So I made all these weird kind of washed ruined, sprayed, scrubbed kind of images. So that's sort of like another part of the field, and then another part of the field. I know I'm trying to go really fast and get to some other images, but I just literally wanted to lay all of this out. I think all of this is quote unquote what I do. Sometimes I spend the semester taking classes. I've been doing it for years, and in this case I took a class in the history of phenomenology, or sort of Phenomenology 101, a philosophy class, and I make zines. That's Kant, that's a light bulb, that's a joke, the Enlightenment. And then this is a chart that I made, which was a response to I spent like months reading classic philosophy from the 17th, 18th, 19th, and 20th century, and I made this chart about like what was great about certain people and what was not so great about them, and published it. And I think that's part of my work too. And then, this is just a funny thing where I went to a protest right after Trump was elected with my sign. Then I made my sign into a protest thing. Then I made the protest sign into my shower curtain. And then I was invited to be in a show in Detroit that was called 99 Cents. And it was supposed to be made with stuff that you got at the junk store. So I sent them my shower curtain. And then I got a good review because the question of the shower curtain was sort of critical and snarky, and they took it as a critique of the show that I was in. So I felt like I kind of won. Anyway, so that's like a little roundup of like stuff that could be, and I was really thinking about this because I went to the Soviet show and at the museum on Friday and Saturday, and I thought, you know, all of daily life is in that show, and all of daily life should be in my slideshow. And I think it's important to look at all the weird ways that like art is made out of everyday life. So, as I said, now I'm going to switch to a slightly different thing. It's about process. So I've always been trying to figure out how to make stuff out of the combustion that occurs between two states of being. And one state of being is looking at people directly and looking at the world and using your hand as a kind of transcribing tool for acquiring what you're seeing, drawing it into your own hand, then body, and then it sort of is a circle. It comes back out your mouth, and then it goes back to your eye or your ear. The process of portraiture is very important to me. So this was a group of people that I was friends with in Williamsburg in the late 80s, and I drew all of them for a show that I was in. And then, way later in 2008, I was thinking about like how much I enjoyed the process of portraiture, and so I thought, I'm gonna go draw every couple I know and just hang out with them during the day, and it'll be my version of relational aesthetics. And I'll just sit in the room with them and like hang out. They can do whatever they want, and I'll just be there and I'll be drawing them. So if you see at the top left, it's a picture of a couple. They were actually about to have a baby, so the woman on the right is pregnant. And so I spent the day with them and I drew them, and then I made a rule for myself, which was that, and this is the middle drawing on the top. I had a rule that I would take all the drawings that I did, bring them home, and try to make, without looking at them, make one drawing that was everything I could remember from what I had been doing. So I made these kind of funny drawings that actually looked sort of a little distorted and sort of cartoony and kind of great. And it was just, the rule was only one. Then I had the next assignment for myself, which was then take the one that you made that was what you could remember and use it as a kind of abstract structural study, and just forget about the character and forget about the person and forget about looking, and just use the structure of what you've developed from what you could remember seeing and make it into a print. And then I was making etchings out of these, and I ended up, you see the top one and then the lower one, it's the lower row goes in order. And so it graded for me like quite directly from upper left to lower right. And then it went further and it became this thing, and then the one on the right is kind of the color is a little off, but it was the actual etching like that I made that came out of doing all of that. And it was highly synthesized and highly abstracted and highly deviated from, but all of, I mean, in a way, it was kind of dumb because I realized after doing that for 2 years that all I did was reinvent the wheel and that I was just doing what like Diebenkorn and Matisse and everybody else had done, but I had to do it myself to figure out how abstraction could be a thing that was a process of thinking and being in the world and looking, and that it wasn't a design, and that abstraction wasn't a just like dumb, cheap thing that looks cool or pretty or attractive or well composed. That was what I was against. So then I made paintings out of those things, and so this series of paintings that I made around 2009, 2008, 2009, 2010, I have a few examples. Well, no, now we go to another series, but like this painting came directly from looking at making all the studies of those people. And the reason I'm trying to set this kind of a stage is also, I guess, to just, in a way, talk about the fact of thinking as a key component of enacting an abstraction. That's what's behind it that you would never see. I would ordinarily never tell anyone this, and I wouldn't show those pictures in order to show this painting, but stuff is compressed in there, and that's what I think abstract painting partly is. It's a kind of form of compression, and it's like, it's either a mirror or a stone. It may not be a mirror because you may not be able to see what's in the inside of the compression, but I think it's what's in painting, or potentially in painting, at its very highest level. So then here's just another series, a couple and a dog, then done from life, then what I could remember, then the print. I just threw them in because I thought it would be explanatory if you look at some abstract paintings. And then this was the painting that resulted from one of those couple paintings, and it's huge, and it doesn't have anything to do with them, and it was hung in a room with one portrait, and I don't know if anyone even understood what they were looking at. So then, this is just the end of that portrait thing. Some friends had a gallery in the Lower East Side and around 2009, 10, I forget the dates exactly. I think 6, 7, 8, or 8, 9, 10 or something, and it was called Orchard. And it was a very important and interesting group of artists, theorists, art historians, writers, who were all working in this temporary gallery project, which was intended as a kind of critical project. And they asked me to be in the second to last show. And they were not the kind of gallery that shows painting at all. So that wasn't really going to be what I was going to have in there. But I thought, okay, I'll take it seriously. I'll do a portrait of the entire group of people at Orchard, like all the people that I would be able to sit with and look at who would let me draw them, and I'll just draw them all, and I'll put the images on the table every Saturday. So I spent the whole week walking around, spending the day with people and drawing them, and then I would go to the table and just dump off the drawings. And my idea was that people could maybe shift through them, and that it would be critical of the, phallocracy of the wall. But that didn't work at all because people were afraid to touch them and they wouldn't get involved in them. And it was a little bit of a learning curve, and slightly didn't work out because nobody would touch the pictures or move them around. But I ended up showing them, and I have them still, and I'm keeping them because I think it's a little time capsule of who was in that group of people and what they looked like at that moment. So that's the sort of portrait abstraction kind of combustion. And now I'm just going to show you one other thing, but I'm going to skip through it really fast, just so that also you see the sort of steps of with all of that in mind. Now I'll show you how a painting might go. A lot of times the paintings that I've made continue changing and being wiped out and wiped out and wiped out and wiped out for like a year. So there's this one, and it's being shown, here it is in its place where it was shown, and then this is how it started, and I'm just gonna flip through it. I just casually took pictures like once in a while whenever I felt like I had remembered. So the painting sort of did this. So I think that that's how it ended. And the thing that's sort of crazy about that is that all the paintings do that. And I didn't know until pretty recently that that was even weird, or that that was even unusual. I just thought that's what you're supposed to be doing when you're painting. And so that's what I'm always doing. And I did that for like 25 years. I probably only made about 20 paintings. But that's what I was busy doing all the time. So I think I have this one funny one that you can sort of see the progression, just another one. But what I didn't understand, because I never had a camera. I wasn't good at like techie stuff and camera stuff. So I never ever had I didn't make films. Even though all my friends and everyone I've ever lived with or been in love with makes films and videos, I didn't know how to do it. And so that's the end of the painting. I didn't know how to make a film because I didn't have I felt like I just didn't have that tech thing. I only knew how to do anything with my hands. And then I got an iPhone, and I was like, oh, wow, I can just draw, save, draw, save, draw, save, draw, save, draw, save, draw, save. So I started to do the same thing that I'm showing you in photo. And just keep the drawings and just make a new one, make a new one, make a new one, make a new one, dump all the little stills into a file in a computer and just string them together and output them as an animated film. And then I realized, of course, when I started to make these films, that they were the exact same thing as my paintings, and why hadn't I done this when I was 15 instead of I don't know, 90 or however old I was when I started. And I even got a really kind of a little bit of a mean review for the show in one magazine. I did this big survey show at the ICA Boston where somebody said, yeah, the paintings, they're fine, but actually, why doesn't she just do this? And I only had done one of them, and it was therefore a rather bad review. But I definitely take this practice very seriously, and it's partly why I tried to show you all that other stuff. That's sort of the end of that little clip. But having done all of, having arrived finally at a way of incorporating mechanical reproduction and time-based work and video just through kind of, homemade bedroom productions like I was talking in the beginning, I sort of figured out that there could be a huge painting like this, which now you know what's inside of it. And then there could be a little teeny video that would be mounted on a wall in a gallery or a museum that would repropose the idea of what the end of the painting is. So if a painting which looks, if a painting which looks like this is this is a beautiful big abstract painting, and I really like this painting, and when you're in real life you can see all the work and all the pentimenti and all the scuffed up surface and all the scraping, and it's very beautiful. But when you see a painting, you think that the painting is the end point. And that's, I think, one reason why people critique painting and think of it as this kind of, bourgeois trophy object, because it's expensive and it just hangs there and it's the end of its line. And it just stands there needing glory and needing admiration. And it isn't my attitude at all, as you can see. And I would easily take a scraper to that thing, and if they would let me at it, I would change it tomorrow. But if you have a little video that's hanging in the room with it, the video can repropose the painting as not an end point, but a midpoint. So at this point, I started to make now I'm just jumping back a little bit just to show you that this was done in when I was just getting out of college. I was clearly already doing that. And I was doing this a little bit after college, but setting up these paintings that I saw them as grids that you should read from left to right, like a comic strip, and repeating certain panels to sort of couch them in a sort of time-based reading rather than in a spatial reading, which is what a painting usually has. And then I went for a little while and lived in Texas and made all these really long, horizontal line kind of works that were sort of, all of this is the stuff that came before all of the animation, and it was basically the idea of an animation without having known how to do an animation, but wanting you to be the person who walks through the room and is therefore the machine that makes the thing move, rather than you sit in a chair and watch something like going by. So I was doing, this is a show that I had in Dartmouth, actually, of works that I had done in Texas, that was sort of mounted all the way around the room. And I was making these I would call them animation sequences, actually. They were sort of like long, thin strips that you would walk around, and as you kind of walk past it, here's an example in drawing form. This is one, and I kind of literally thought of you as kind of walking past this thing, and then this one, 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 and I don't know if there's another one, and there might even be another one. No, but so this was the sort of pre-making an animation kind of artwork that was, in a sense, containing the notion of a kind of timeline within it anyway, and so I was already making the videos at this point, but in this particular show, which I had in New York, I think it was in 2010 or 12 or 14 or something, I mounted one room of a gallery with this exact kind of little sequential kind of walk around, and it was and the little sequential drawing walk around was installed as the sort of core of the show with these big giant paintings surrounding it. So you could see a big giant beautiful painting, but you could also sort of escape from the world of the big painting and get into the sort of teeny detail thing that, as you kind of moved past it, was a story about how a light bulb turned into an examination tool for a person's body. Then I hope this is not too complicated or confusing. I'm being clear, right? I'm not even going to let you answer. Then I was invited right after that to do a fellowship at Radcliffe, and that was at this moment, I guess it was like around 2010, 2011, where I thought like, okay, I have to make something about being in this strange residency at Radcliffe, so I'm gonna scan all those light bulb drawings and make them into a story, and I ended up making a rather sad and funny animation, which I'm only gonna show you a tiny bit of, but I want you to see it because it's where language comes back in, and it's silent. Anyway, that's a piece that goes on for about, I don't know, 20 minutes or something, and I don't have time to show you the whole thing, but this was something that I figured out how to make like with sticks and paper and cutting out pieces of paper and moving them like on, with like in a very shabby and rather abject way. But I wrote this kind of funny and I think kind of beautiful text for it, which was written as I would draw, and then the text would be embedded, and then the text would sort of call for a new drawing, and then I would make the new drawings, and then the thing would go back. And it sort of struck me at that point that I'm basically always collaborating with myself, and that it's kind of like I'm me, and I'm also my other collaborator who I work with who does something quite different, and that this sort of let's call it a dialectic system is how I think like the work kind of keeps going. So I went then to Berlin, and I had this big show of paintings and drawings, and I was living then at the American Academy in Berlin, which I got a grant to live at. And I made all the paintings, and it was like normal paintings, but at this point I was actively trying to figure out how to embed in a painting space something that destabilized the painting or added an intimacy, a personalness, a humor, a funniness, a question about the ending, something that would, like, sorry to say it, but just something that would fuck the painting up. And I didn't really know how to do it except by being sort of funny. So when I was there, I thought, oh, I'm gonna have a little zine that I'm gonna print at the Xerox shop. And it's just gonna be because I don't really know if the people in Germany are gonna understand how my paintings are critical, and they're just gonna think they're regular, big, abstract, dumb trophy-like things. So I put this little zine together that was all about what does a diagram mean, and I wrote an essay, and I had other essays and little cartoons in there, and it was a lot of the diagrams were things like this, where I would be at night in the fancy academy where I lived, I would be taking notes about the people that I was living with and including them in sarcastic diagrams about social life. And there was this one. We don't have to go through it all. You can sort of see that they're sarcastic. And then there was this one, and like the seating charts were included in the diagram thing, but so was my idea that painting itself is a diagram. It's a kind of, that's why I'm trying to explain all this stuff about the backstory, because I think that actually paintings and all abstraction is a kind of diagrammatic, weird sort of skeletal structure of what you can remember and what you can see and what you know and what you don't know. And it's a very beautiful, flexible, the diagram is a beautiful polymorphous perverse form that can contain all of this difference in its arms. So I got interested in the theory of diagrams, and meanwhile I made this, this was in 2009, so I was already deeply involved in looking at all the material that is you can see at the Art Institute right now, and thinking about how to put all of this extraneous content that just leaks out from the side of painting into a room where you can look at the painting, but you don't have to be stuck with the painting. And you can look at my sense of humor, but you don't have to be stuck with my sense of humor. So then I started making this little zine, which I still make. It's called the OG. It stands for, it's actually named after a Lizitzky Ehrenberg magazine that they made I think in 29 when they lived in Berlin, called Wieck Objet Gegenstand, which means object, object, object. But mine's just called Object Objet Gegenstand because OG, as you probably know, means the old gangster, and I'm like always the oldest person, that I know who's, at a party. I feel like I am the OG. But anyway, I make these things and I put them into the room. That's the one about enlightenment. That had the chart in it. And so I'm making all of these kind of things, and then I think, wow, I can't just always make jokes, and I can't just always make like cartoons or t-shirts or posters. I have to work with other people who are generating content that has to do with language that I can't necessarily produce because I'm not a writer. Meanwhile, while I'm saying all of this, I'm also busy painting, like all these paintings, which I haven't even had time to show you, but I'll show you a few. So I started at some point in the middle of all this, I started working with poets because I thought, well, if I work with poets, then I'll be responding to their language rather than having to, kind of come up with all of my own language, which is what writers do. And I love that there are writers, but I'm not one. So I need words, I need texts, and I need the use of language given to me by other people. So in this case, I will only show you like a second of it, but I made a video with a very wonderful poet named Lisa Robertson, who lives in France, and she literally gave me a poem that I could make a video of, and I made this one, which I'll show you like literally like 1 minute of, and then we'll move on. A young woman looks openly out of the picture. A young woman looks openly out of the picture. Her experience of scale is always paradoxical. As for the unconscious, she is breathing in its Latin. Philosophy comes from her having difficulty. Her experience of scale is always paradoxical. When girls were flowers, this wasn't true. Her pronoun is sedition, unrecognized as such. The women is itself not a content. Her voice turns towards weakness and shame, and it pours down her face. When it comes to flowers, she is parody. How does she represent herself as thinking? So what if she is thick and stupid behind her life? It is not private. Okay, we're going to stop it and keep moving. So I started working with poets, and I worked with Charles Bernstein, I worked with Lisa, and now I've worked with Ovid. And I want to, next year I want to do one with Sappho. I'm sure she would be delighted if I made a cartoon for her. And, now what I want to turn to is, you see like how the embedding and the thinking and the transforming and all of this like combustion is working. And I want to sort of say a few things about like how the digital, the printed, the mechanically produced, and the video and the phone and all that kind of stuff affected the paintings. So the thing on the left is a still from the video with the poem by Lisa, and the thing on the right is, I decided that I would, in that case, start the other way and make an abstract painting based on a tiny phone drawing. So the thing in real life on the left is this size and made with my finger, and the thing on the right is like a big abstract painting. And then things started getting really interesting for me, because they started to bleed into each other and affect each other and then come back out the other side. So because the stills of painting of these phone drawings can be done in like a second, and as you've seen in the past, a lot of the work that I've done takes years and it's super agonizing and slow. I was liberated by this idea that like, what if I made a painting in an hour and just left it? And that was a very weird and difficult and challenging proposition for me, because I didn't want to leave anything alone, but I wanted to have that same freedom that you have when you're using a phone. So I started to make these abstract paintings where I forced myself to make them really fast, and I made a lot of them. This is another phone drawing, and then this is the painting that came from it. So I made a lot of these like fast, weird, clunky, and slightly shabby paintings, and they kind of they fit together in a really interesting way. And I started to, at that point, this was a show that I had in Berlin. I forget what year we're in. Now we're in 2017. I think it was in 2011 or 12 or 13 or something. But at this point, now the rest of the slideshow is really about like just trying to explain to you how I would set up a show. So at this point, like all wheels are firing. There's video, there's zines, there's like jokes, there's cartoons, and then there's big paintings. So in this particular show, where you see the arrow, I embedded a video that was made to go with that painting on the right, and then which we've seen, and then I don't need to show you that. And then in another room of the gallery was a huge display, not this one, but similar, of this like kind of mega room of like stills, which you could by sitting in, you could actually kind of in a weird way like still the motion and look at all the individual drawings individually. In the back of the rooms that I was installing these big things with, I would usually have the video playing just so that you would understand the relationship between the two. And so I got to the point where I thought like, wow, I need to work faster. Like maybe I really should try to like make things really fast. And I make zillions of drawings, and I mean like millions. So like a lot of the drawings, I'm not showing you almost any of them, but this was just like a little 1 day's worth of drawing when I was trying to force myself to go really fast and see if I could take the speed of digital work and put it into so-called normal abstraction. And I decided to take these drawings, photograph them, and print them in inkjet on canvas panels. And I had a show in Paris, and I set up the canvas panels in a line, as I had done many times in the past, and just occupied this one corner of the gallery with a series of largely printed. There were a few things that were sort of stained on top, but it was mostly just printed drawing on canvas. And then I thought, like, wow, this room is really kind of bleak and just has this moment of abstraction in one corner. I need something else. And so sort of at the last minute, like the day before the show opened, I took charcoal on the wall and I drew exactly what you can sort of see. I drew exactly what the shapes all were, but I gave them all names that I had combed through Freud to get. I just literally, like, I was reading Freud's Beyond the Pleasure Principle at that moment, and I just, like, drew all the pictures of the shapes that were in the thing and then titled them with supposed putative meaning, which was actually all the stuff that I just literally stole from Freud. So it's all completely fake. And then it was sort of a funny room because people who looked at the abstraction to say, like, what does it mean, couldn't see the key, and people who looked at the key to understand what it meant couldn't see the work. And I thought that that was actually, like, kind of a funny, that was a kind of brilliant, like pressure cooker of dialectics, and I wanted to do it again. And I was invited to do this show at this really fancy place in Austria called Bregenz Kunsthaus. This is a building by Peter Zumthor, and it's like literally the highest modernism that there is. I don't even know what it means when they say high modernism, but I know that this is it. And I thought, I don't want to put a painting on this wall because it's just going to look like a stamp or something. So I thought, okay, let me walk around town. And I walked around town, and down the street from the Bregenz is this crazy chapel where the inside of the building is totally made out of stuff that's pink. And I thought, like, pink. Everything in this town is pink. Everything is pink in this place. It's just completely pink, except for the show at the Bregenz Kunsthaus that's going to be there when I'm there, which is Heimo Zobernig, and that's going to be black, and it's going to be high modernism, and it's going to be squares. So I'll make something pink, and it's going to be low modernism, and it's not going to be very good. And it's going to be like a machine for looking at painting without ever looking at any paintings or putting any paintings on the wall. It's actually a very modest gesture, if I say so myself. And one side of it, because I knew that Heimo was going to have a huge public-sized black square, I figured, okay, I'll make a pink one, and it'll have this is like what it came from. And I thought, oh, and because I had been living in Rome right before that, and I had seen this amazing jar from some time in ancient Rome that I thought was incredible, because now you know I really love and respond to doubleness. And then I had also gone to this incredible show at 80 Washington Square East in New York and seen these heads that were made by this guy called Son Thomas. Is that correct? It's not Son Ford. I think his name is Son Thomas, and he was a famous blues man and ceramicist. And I was very moved by these works that he had made. So I thought, all right, I'll have heads, and they'll be on the pink wall, and they'll be like banks, and you'll put the money for the zine inside the head, and it'll come out at the bottom. That means put the money in the bucket. And then you put the money in the bucket and you go around to the other side and you can get a zine. And then, so it all looks like this kind of weird kiosk that you don't really understand with like images and this shabby heads and a weird thing that you can take and, you know, boxes and drawings that are nice, but they're sort of put in a very how do you say it? Like in a way that looks like they're not good yet. And then, or let's say they're hanging with no frame and they look odd. And then you come around the corner and then there's this fold out, and I printed the whole thing. I printed all the meaning, but I just didn't want to show what it was. and you give the money here, but then you come around the corner, and right next to the wall, sort of hidden very shyly in the back corner, are the real drawings that would be the things that I think would be the art that is supposed to go on the high modernist wall. But instead, it's all like crowded in the back and kind of hidden, and it's strung along in a line, and it's a kind of direct and immediate version of a diagram transcribed on these like free and open but sort of hidden pieces of paper. And I liked the idea of kind of hiding the art in a little bit of a closet. I tried later, this was a show that I was in about a year later, there's my dog, and I tried hanging the work on the same drawings on a color that made sense in a different context. So I'm also interested at the same time in all of these aesthetic questions, like what color should be there. In Bregan's, it had to be pink. In Mary Boone, it had to be a kind of ugly yellow. Sort of money, but urine. I continued to do, this is my studio, I continued to do like millions of more pink drawings for the rest of the year, and the black drawings. So in a sense, I was reducing the palette for a while and kind of restricting the kind of like any color, all color, to see if I could get much more intimate and subtle and I will say, I guess, you know, how do you say it without sounding gross? I would be skillful in exactly which colors and which tones I was using. And then I thought, well, I'll show you this. Then I went to this Roman thing, and I thought, okay, I have to work with another poet. Maybe I'll read Ovid, because all of the work is constantly about changes. So I got to Rome, and I read the Ovid very carefully, and I thought, okay, I'm going to collaborate with Ovid. And I made a list. I went through Ovid, and I made a list of just exactly what changes into what in Ovid's Metamorphosis, so that I had just like a long line that skipped the story, forget about all the like horrible reasons for everyone doing everything in Metamorphosis, just cut to the chase. You know, a bird becomes a mushroom becomes a man, etc. And I made a video of that series. I basically gave myself that score as another assignment. I seem like I'm always in school giving myself assignments. I gave myself the assignment that I had to make exactly what happened in Ovid happen, but like in layers on my phone. So I had this kind of abstract video that I kind of came up with that was the bathtub drawings with pictures laid over them. I'm gonna stop it. And then I had this one where the abstract thing is played opposite an animation of the first scene of what happens in Ovid's Metamorphosis, and it just keeps playing. And then all of that was kind of embedded in a big giant painting show. And then, you know, now I can show you some paintings, like finally, like we're almost done. But this was a painting show I had in New York 2016, a couple of years ago. And, you know, they were big, beautiful abstract paintings, and they were made in all the ways I've just told you, with exactly the same processes and thinking. I intended them to be seen in relationship to drawings, which made sense with them. And I also intended the paintings to be seen in relationship to the videos and the posters and the printed stuff. And so the show was, in a way, an attempt to maintain or embrace such a wide array of things that if somebody didn't like the drawings, they could look at the paintings. If somebody didn't like the paintings and the drawings, these are the paintings. They're big and thick, and they take long to make. But if somebody didn't like these paintings, and these were all like huge, they could go to another part of the gallery and see that thing functioning in relationship to another form, in this case with a tiny animation that was mounted in the wall. And in the back room was that same thing that I had made in Paris in the small gallery with the jokes on the key on the other side. But now I expanded it to like huge, like much bigger than me. And it filled the entire back room of the gallery, and they were sitting on shelves. So this is I think this is the last show that I'm going to show you. The last show I had in Europe, well, no, 2 shows ago, was this project. So I took only the printed panels in this space, which is a very skinny, tall, weird space in Frankfurt called Porticus. You walk in here, and I made this, well, I'm going to show you this first. I made this kind of spiral construction where when you first come in, you come in this, you come in this doorway, and what you're confronted with is this giant wall, and on it is playing an animation. And then, as you enter the room, so the animation is playing, and it's a kind of foyer with the theme of the show the content of the show kind of on display. Then you enter the room, and you're surrounded by this gigantic room of really quite large panels, which are printed on inkjet, on canvas, with a very little amount of painting on it, not very much. So they do function in a way as stills on my phone, or something that would be made quickly and not in the way that I would make a painting. And in the middle of the room was this little teeny figurine where you could get your zine and you could put money in her mouth and it would drop into the bucket. And so you constantly heard this sound of like euros falling into a bucket. And that was her. There's a hole under her, so it goes into the bucket. And then the video that I made to go with that piece related to the image of her and dropping money into. I'm just going to go back for 1 second. I'm sorry. The video, which you need to see like 2 seconds of, was about bad luck. It was about a really bad, crummy trip to Switzerland. And the whole video was kind of a little intro about like being eaten, being destroyed, being run over, having someone put money in your mouth, having the money come out your ass, having someone steal the bucket, having the bucket be put atop of a doorway, which then spills on you, like the practical joke. You'll see. It takes like 1 minute. This was the sort of, someone steals your leg. The girl with the bucket is there. She puts the bucket on top of the door. A black cat. Someone misfortunate. The bucket spills. It's bad. Pig comes, paints the urine into a yellow wall. That's where I got the color for the Mary Boone. And then another kind of a terrorist comes, or someone with bad intentions, and then a black cat, and then it all begins again. So the whole movie was about bad luck. It culminated with this person where you put your filthy lucre into her mouth, and she shat it out. And then this really is the last thing. This was the show that actually is still up in Berlin right now, and if you want to see it, you can. And I brought the lady to the gallery in Berlin, and she's up front. And then you see these big giant paintings, which look like legitimate abstraction, but now you know what's in them. And they're, kind of shabby, kind of falling apart, kind of sad. Kind of felt, like thoughtful, feeling about the body. There's a corner in the show where a group of yellow drawings hangs, because I finally got sick of pink, and I moved on to yellow. And And then there are these pairings, where a big painting and a little painting, which is what we started with, a big painting, a shameful painting, which is hidden kind of near a wall that it's hard to see when you first walked in, and then it leads to a gigantic painting that's like 14 feet tall, a medium-sized painting, that's that one, a medium-sized painting that's sort of another kind of shabby, weird, slightly falling apart. My friend Kirsten in Germany calls it antisocial painting, because she feels like it's painting that's not trying to be, that's being aggressive and kind of negative and functioning more like a wound than like a trophy. And then like little teeny paintings, little drawings of an extremely unfortunate relationship and its aftermath. And then an abstraction upstairs that's like a regular old abstract painting, which I mean, I can talk for an hour about just abstract painting, but I wanted to tell you more stuff. And then downstairs, the video, which is the Ovid video, which I actually made, and I couldn't embed it in this, so I'm gonna show you 1 minute of it, and then we're gonna be done. But I just want you to see a little bit of the Ovid video, because I really love it. Let's see, how do we make it go? Okay, just the beginning. A score is written for me by a Anyway, the bathtub drawings that I told you about are the background. So the only other thing I wanted to tell you about that work is that it's made to go in with paintings, and the background of it is made just like a painting, but it's the overlay, which is the cartoonal part, which is the sort of sequence of narratives that occurs in Ovid. So I hope that wasn't too, how do you say, schooly, like A, B, C, but I actually thought it was nice to have an opportunity to explain the underpinnings of abstract paintings rather than just looking at them in admiration and silence. So thank you for bearing with me. And I'm happy to answer questions. And I know I'm sorry, I'm sure it's super late and you don't want to stay here anymore, but I think if you want to ask a question, you can. I don't know are they allowed? Is it okay? I don't want
Yeah. Since, you reference Freud, you reference, Ovid and many other writers, who put such heavy symbolism in their form and in the way that they use sort of language. I was wondering how you relate to your friends in that respect, but also how form and meaning come to, become a constellation for you guys.
Thank you for that. I mean, like I've always been saying for a really long time that I'm some kind of weird formalist, but not maybe the ist. I mean, I feel like it's everything but the kind of linguistic content. The form is how I believe very strongly, and maybe I skipped past too much painting. I mean, like literally like 30 years worth of paintings that you would have to just look at in silence and either get or not get. I feel like the surface of the painting, the compression of the painting, the scraping, the shabbiness that I was talking about, the wound quality, the weirdness, the sort of awkwardness that I'm trying to achieve as a painter is in the paintings, and I think you can feel it, but I believe that you have to work on form because I don't think, I don't think you have anything else to work on in a weird way if you're a painter. You have this very restricted kind of, template. It's like, it's basically flat, usually square, not always, but it's kind of like this thing, flat thing. And all of the desire and intention and reworking and flippancy, not caring or caring, all of that is compressed and built and evident and palpable to the viewer in a sort of quiet, personal relationship that is also quite mysterious. Like, what are people doing when they're looking at stuff in museums? I still don't have a clue. And I mean, I'm curious about that. So I'm not a writer, and I'm not a scholar, and I have this other thing at my disposal, which is this other thing. It's excess, and it's quite mysterious to me. And at the same time, I think I know it when I feel it, and it's super intuitive, and it's super not academic, and it's not about knowing. It's about not knowing, and it's about knowing something through the body. So I don't know, I feel like that's all form. Like I feel like if we stop having a body, then there will be no need to talk about form. But we're still metabolizing food, sleeping, walking around, going like, whoa, And I feel like all of those things are what, to me, form contains. And maybe what I mean is abstraction. It could be that what I mean is a kind of painting abstract form, but I think in those terms, and I try. I'm not an illustrator, and I'm actually not a transcriber of text or even a generator of texts. I think I tried taking a poetry class last year, and I couldn't write a word. I literally, every week I would come in with nothing, and finally the teacher said, can you just make sounds and write down, and just go like, ugh. And I was like, maybe that should be, there's this zone of silence and not knowing that is what, for me, is what you're dealing with when you're dealing with form. Does that make at all an answer? Such a great question. We just talk about form. Hi.
So this lecture was very pedagogical, but also the work is too, and the shift from the kind of coding of the body to the unpacking of the time-based nature of the imagery. And I'm just wondering about that shift, because even though it's very generous in terms of explaining your work, it's also like a fully fledged theory of abstract painting as time-based and being with the painting. And I'm just wondering about that shift and how much the increasing opening of the paintings to your process and displaying them, how much of that relates to feedback you've gotten, either positive or negative, from people who either really got your paintings or completely didn't get them, and that was frustrating. Because these seem more vulnerable because they open up more than, say, the earlier work did in terms of how they came into being.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, the zine started in Germany when I actually was pretty sure that I would be misunderstood. And they were an attempt to rescue misunderstand, like to like subvert to derail misunderstanding and make understanding, but not with like a thing that says, here's what these paintings mean. So I feel like, yeah, I'm losing the thread of the question. I mean, I think that that whole thing about form, about all, I could just have a show with paintings and I wouldn't say any of this and there wouldn't be anything else there. But I feel like there's this way that an alive and awake human is dissatisfied with that space all by itself. I'm dissatisfied with it when I only look at someone's paintings that's like 10 paintings, different colors, they look great. I mean, I'm actually dissatisfied with that. So I don't know if it's pedagogical or if it's just temperamental, that I'm just like annoyed by product and annoyed by repetition of like painting endings. And I'm seeking experiences that like force a painting experience to have a different ending. And I don't know what else to say except for that I think it allowed, the reason I would want to talk about all this if I were giving a lecture was just because this is the only time I get to do this. Like usually I might just have a show, like in Berlin, I have a big show and literally I don't think anyone understood it. I got 2 people who came up to me afterwards and said, oh my God, I love it. They're both painters. And literally every other person that I know there was like, I was like, did you see my show? Like, do you have any thoughts? And they were like, I want to compose my thoughts and get back to you. And it was like actually scary because I wrote back to one friend and I said, that bad? And he went, oh no, I liked it, but I just want to write down my thoughts. And I was like, okay, I don't know. I don't know if like, I know that my two great abstract painter friends in Berlin literally like grabbed me and they were like, we love the show. It's so well hung. It's so clear to us. And literally like everyone else was like, great. So, I mean, I'm really working on that. I'm working on like wanting to have that and at the same exact time to completely squash that and to not allow people to walk around going like, I don't know, just don't understand painting. I just hate that. So I don't know, my answer is that I have hatred and boredom, not, those are my pedagogy tools. Oh, yes.
I see your work as kind of a language of visual gesture. And I wonder, are there other artists that you responded to? Is there where you're in dialogue, if you've been stimulated in a certain way, or you have done like when you said you wanted to squash something, or when you see something, is it something you wanted to squash or came up with other gestures in response?
Well, I mean, I look at everything and I love I'm a very Catholic viewer. Like, I like a lot more painting than I don't like. So I feel like I'm responding to gestural painting. I'm responding to the whole sweep of gestural abstraction in American post-war painting. I'm also responding to like ideas that, that in medieval, art that I really love. I'm responding to sculpture. I'm responding to the fact that I studied Japanese and I have a calligraphic kind of hand. Responding to Guston, who's hilarious, Ad Reinhardt, who's split between pure abstraction and jokes. Responding to, I think the only thing I'm probably not really responding to is pop art. Like the weird thing is I don't have like a camera-based practice, so my work is not really about photographs, except for that as machines for holding onto a layer. So I think I'm responding to painting as a as a calligraphic and gestural form, and pretty much if you name anyone, I'll be like, yeah, I love it. Yeah, I love it. I mean, I don't know how to, boil it down further than that. I mean, I go through periods where I'm like, I love this more. Like last summer I went to Paris and looked at Manet's and started weeping because I felt like I finally got it. But it wasn't about the gesture, it was about the antagonism in the painting, which I had never really seen before and was really moved by. Oh, if you have anything, I will go outside.